Hi, everyone. This is a first-time idea, really. So the idea of this was born a few years ago. This has been gestating for a few years. So many of you don't. So most of you, or a lot of you, know who Duncan is. Who doesn't know who Duncan is? Okay. It seems like 50-50, Duncan.
Not bad.
Yeah. So, was it 3 years ago? Is it that long ago?
I think it was a little longer than that.
Really? I get an email from someone named Duncan Trussell who says, I am both a stand-up comedian in LA and I have a podcast, and I love Ram Dass. Basically, you should be doing podcasts. You have all of these great talks from Ram Dass. You should just introduce them, and you'll be surprised what happens next, right? At the same time, Ram Dass and I were talking about just having a chat one day, and I was kind of saying, is there anything you think that we should be doing from the foundation, which is Love, Serve, Remember Foundation, dedicated to the continuation and preservation of teachings of Maharaji and Ram Dass and other friends that we've had as part of our family for decades. And he said it would be great if this, because we are obviously in this age of technology, if we can make this available to the next generation, that would make me happy. And I said, well, that's exactly what I've been thinking as well. So let's see what happens. And right around there is when Duncan sent me that email, and that started a progression of different people and lent their hands to get this, everything that Ram Dass and has been representing, and others of us for all of these years, to make it available, to the point where I was in dinner line yesterday and bumped into a couple of young women, and I said, how did you get here? And they went, Duncan, and who had never met them, and I introduced them to Duncan and then to Ram Dass, and I said, finally, here's living proof of the fact that this is all now getting out to a new generation. So we thank you, really, for what you. And there is interesting parallels here that I want to bring up, related to our cultivating the courage to love. And when Ram Dass first came back from India, and you talked about it yesterday, about how Maharaji, in that moment, around your mother and the non-judgment and the unconditional love that you experienced, you were able to love yourself really for the first time in a way that you had not before. And what my experience was, after you came back from India and started talking in public, was a level of honesty that I had not heard before from anybody, and a vulnerability and a sharing of that vulnerability, that such a powerful word and full of meaning, that I felt like I could breathe for the first time in hearing those first talks, and then hearing you in person. And in a very interesting, so I want you to talk about that. And the parallel is here with Duncan when he talks, when he does his podcast. What's endearing him to people is both his connection. I mean, he just doesn't stop talking about you and the teachings and so on. But what's endearing him is that he is not afraid to talk about his own shortcomings and so on, so people feel connected. So there is a wonderful connection between all those years ago, all the way to this moment. But Ram Dass, can you talk about vulnerability and honesty as critical to being able to, as part of this concept of courage, to be able to look at ourselves?
Maharaji said to me, like as I told you yesterday, love everybody. But then he said, love everybody and tell the truth. Love everybody and tell the truth. And my life was continually white lies. For example, we at the Millbrook, no, it was Millbrook, it was Newton. We had a Saturday night LSD party. And then on Monday, I was to lecture at Harvard. And yet I can't tell the students what happened on Saturday night. And to the students, I was giving them lies because I was teaching psychology. And I knew that was all just horrible. Horrible. And I was just fitting in to my life, not making waves. And lies. That airplane is my karma, because for years with my little plane, I stalled and acrobatics over a residential area. Now that,
And you were on acid too.
we don't talk about that. It's a lie. When I came back from India, I had met Maharaji. And I come back to the West, and Maharaji was a jewel that I had, a jewel to share. And I remember the Maharajis don't tell anybody. But then I could not tell everybody, because this was to my thinking, he was an evolution for mankind. And yet we were Einstein and Lincoln, but we didn't know the real thing. The real thing. The real. And I wanted to tell it as purely as I could. That every ash in my body all of it, because when I came to Maharaji, I was a Buddhist. Jeez. And I wanted only, those Hindus, my God, they loud music from and poster art. And so many god and goddesses and stones that represented. And here I was, a Jew, and we don't have stones. In the Bible, we don't have stones. Craving images, yeah. And yet I wanted to instead, I wanted to tell the audience what I had going, and the Land Rover and all of that stuff. And I didn't want to guru. And Maharaji, I don't know, he was an interesting man. But then I came to him and his love for me. All my Meshuggah stuff. That's Sanskrit. But when Raghu was talking about those days, I couldn't stop speaking truth. I couldn't stop from speaking because the subject matter demanded it. Demanded it. Those days, everybody was turned on by that message, and people would say to me, "You're truthful. It's we can't. It's just." I had been in a village in India where people were identifying with their souls, and then their roles are. And then they came back from India, and came back, and boy, New York, I was rolls, and in rolls, everybody can work with the truth. But once you start to go over the edge into states of consciousness, so where you come to soul land, truth gets you so close to God, so close to God. But then they'd say, "Oh, you're so wonderful, you're truth," and I wanted to stop feeding my ego. Don't give me no that. And every time I spoke truth, it lit the spark, and that spark, everybody gets it like that. Truth lights that spark.
What strikes me is, from being in that audience way back when, was, and I think of it now, and you mentioned it, is the caring, that you cared. You were able to tell the truth. You cared so much. And the courage to care in this case came from that experience with Maharaji. And we felt that. And we were lit up, absolutely lit up. So that caring coming from there, I think that's a big deal related to courage. And so, yes, please.
Can I tell the truth real quick?
Okay. Don't go too far now.
Truth.
I am terrified of you. That's the truth. You invited me to do this, to come here and do this many months ago. And I've been nervous ever since. And, yesterday you said that you don't have any... I know! Yesterday you said you don't have any regrets in life. And I was thinking, well, he's about to have one, letting me be up here on stage. But I was thinking, as I was thinking about this, about being up here with you and getting to chat with you and Raghu, I realized that the way I feel about you is the exact way that I feel about love, which is that it's terrifying. I don't feel like I deserve it, but I desperately want it in my life. And I think that's the way that I feel about you, Ram Dass. So, one question that I had for you. And by the way, I've been torturing my girlfriend saying, well, what about this question for him? She's like, no, don't ask him that. That's ridiculous. The question is, how do we love the part of ourselves that hates ourselves? How do we love the part of ourselves that says to us in the midst of the great mushroom trip where the universe is saying to you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And you say to the universe, you couldn't possibly love me. No. You're in a sort of boxing match with love. How do you love that resisting part of yourself? How do you let yourself love that thing which seems to be creating a barrier between suffering and grace?
Well, that thing is a thought. A thought, I'm unlovable, or anything around. And when my thinking apparatus spews out thoughts, they'll get thought. One, I'm not worthy. When I do this kind of thing, that thought is, what am I doing here? That's the first thought that I can't. What am I doing here? And then I say, well, let me find out. So now this is it's a little complicated, but I'm finding out going, but that isn't I down here. And then the soul witnesses the incarnation and witnesses your thoughts. So you're witnessing the thought. From the soul, that thought is not going to get me to God. And then from my soul, I love that thought. I love that thought. I mean, that's like, yeah. I love that. I love that thought. And then if it's a real bad thought, I love it to death.
Cool.
Is that?
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Meanwhile, you get up on your podcasts and you're speaking to your audience, which is considerable, and they have a certain level of trust with you. So there's a place where that trust has to be with yourself as well. Let's talk about how you, that trust. Talk about trust.
Trust.
You, yeah.
Well, that's another thing. This story, the beautiful story of you meeting Maharaji, and the one of the first things, if not the very first thing he said to you, was he asked you for that Land Rover. And I think about that all the time. Because as far as I'm aware, you never say if you actually gave it to him or not. Did you give him the car?
No, I was just caretaking for that car for another his friend, and so the fellow who I was with, who brought me to Maharaji, when Maharaji said, "Could I have the Land Rover?" This fellow jumped up and said, "You can have it, Maharaji." And I fumed. I was there's taking David's car. And, oh, Jesus, this is going to be bad. And, now, the thing that Maharaji said, meditate at the temple. And I was just meditating in the temple for a long period. And I was in the temple, and there was a cook, and there was a pujari in the temple, and me. And they spoke only Hindi, and I didn't speak Hindi. And I was just really meditating. And I heard a commotion outside, and I looked in the window, and there was the fellow. He was driving the Land Rover, and Maharaji was in it.
He got the car then.
Cool.
He got the car.
Well, to answer your question, I think about the trust. And I think about the trust it must have taken you to surrender completely to Maharaji.
Oh.
I think about that leap of faith. To me, that seems like you had to take this dive into a singularity where you don't know what's going to happen after you make that jump. And I feel as though I'm perpetually on the precipice of making that jump. That idea of diving into whatever that is. And people like you, the mystics, they say this is an ocean of love. Jump in. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. But for people like us, the neurotics, we make a house on the very edge of the diving board, and and that's where we spend our lives, listening to people like you call up from the ocean saying, "I'm not kidding, it's great, take the jump." So the trust is an issue for me, because I think that you're inviting all of us in a certain way to die, and it's a terrifying thing, and I always wonder about what was the last thought in your mind before you took that leap? What was that final thought before you dove into that sea?
Well, funny that you should choose that metaphor. Internally, I am ego one level, like this level, and then the soul level, and then the one level. And now, in my inner block, I go from soul level to one, which the way he is. Now, that metaphor, you go up to hop on the beach, you go to the ocean, and then you put your shoes down because they're going to get wet. And then you're going to put an ego down. That's going to be probably wet. And then you're going to dive. That metaphor makes the thing, I'm so diving. Wow. Oh, but I can't, in that metaphor, I can't. So I say, you go from soul to one. The veil is it's thin veil, and you go through the veil, and I figured, aha, thin veil, and I have to go, roar. And it reminded me of our psychedelic history, and I go from one plane to another plane to another plane, which many of us have that go into astral plane and soul plane, and what. So the planes, between the planes is film. It's nice. And I've got now another image that these planes, I'm talking 3 planes. There are many planes, but the ego plane, the soul plane, which is individual souls, and then the one plane. And these are coming, that's what, from ego. If you look at us, when we get to the inner consciousness, which when we call I, that's the one. That's the one. And then the one, the energy and the love and the light from the one goes down through the soul to the ego. Goes that way. And we're in it all. We're in all those. We're in all those planes. We're in all those planes. Every one of us. So when somebody says, like, some person finds themselves in the one plane, interpret it the wrong way. I want to give you the little story. My brother thought he was Christ. And as Christ, he stole a car. And they put him away. My father put him away. And so I came to visit him in the mental hospital. And he said, I want to tell you something. Here, this is funny, the mental hospital, my brother is at a Navy suit, with tie and stuff. I'm beads, and I'm Alfie, which is a piece of cloth, like a Mau, you know, muumuu. And so I come into the hospital, and we stand in the hallway, and he says, I want to tell you something. I'm not telling Mom, but I'll tell you. And he said, I'm the Christ. And I said, well, so am I. And he said, no, you don't understand. That was his paranoia that he was trapped in. The inside, he was interpreting that only he was the one. Every one of us, all of these planes of consciousness. So all I have to do is close my eyes or sing to Ram, and I'll get to the point inside. Doesn't take big jump. All of us can do it. All of us can do it. Am I making myself clear?
Yes. It goes. Yes.
Thank you so much.
It connects with the points of practice, creating pathways and our, certainly what we were given in India was the repetition of the name, and particularly the Hanuman Chalisa, which incredibly has spread throughout this country. Many, many, many people now know it, and it's very difficult, as you know. So I think uh, that alongside of a basic trust in our experience, and for me, I go back to the very beginning of sitting in a talk and hearing Ram Dass talk about his experience in India with Maharaji. But it wasn't, it was in between the words that the trust happened. And I felt connected in a way that I couldn't understand intellectually. The closest I could get to it was a psychedelic experience, because that was beyond thinking. And that's why I'm saying you absolutely have that trust, because I heard it when you first got in touch with me. Basically, it was the same thing that I had. It was a love of Ram Dass and what that energy. And I did the same thing you did, which is really funny. I had, a 50,000 watt rock and roll station that I took the first lecture I had, I put it right up there, and the switchboard lit up. People went crazy. And then I just kept putting it out. Every podcast, you're not everyone, I'm sure, but a lot of them, you are engaging your audience that way. So you have that basic trust.
That actually, what you're saying, that thing where, why did I email you? Was it trust? Oh, I wish it were something as noble as trust. It was pure abject depression. I was in a basement. I was literally in a basement. I was, in the end of a relationship. She was living upstairs. I was living in the basement, playing video games and smoking marijuana nonstop, just trying to forget everything. And I'm sitting there in this miasma, just sick. And I thought, oh, you know what? I'm just going to email Ram Dass and see if he needs any help. I can help at all. But it wasn't.
Well, I don't have any pot.
I don't believe you. But when you consider, what really made me do that, I don't know. And that brings me to a question that I had for Ram Dass, which is, you wrote "Be Here Now," and that book is kind of the opposite of an atomic bomb. It exploded into our culture, and so many people I've spoken with have said that is the spark that set them on their spiritual path. And I don't think that you can calculate how many lives have been changed from the courage you had to come back to the United States, wear a muumuu, and write that book.
But now the book just shows how that courage comes. When I come over from India, said goodbye to Maharaji, then was going to go. He said I should stay in the West for 2 years. He told me my name was Ram Dass. Yeah. And he told me, I have an Ashirvad for your book. Ashirvad means blessing. And I said, what book? And I came back to New York, and I went to the publishers and tried to say, I'm writing a book about India. They weren't buying it for me or anything. And so I thought, well, that isn't his book. That isn't his book. That must not be the book. So then people like him came up, the lectures in New York and Wesleyan and Pennsylvania, and they all said, wow, maybe we. And there was a woman in the audience. She was a court stenographer, and she was writing my message. She just did it for just this. And then she came to me and said, it was all typed in a big stack of papers. And she said, what shall I do with them? I said, well, put it in the trunk of my car. So she put it in the trunk of my car, and I had a gig out at Esalen. So I crossed the country, and I got to Esalen, and they said, well, you want to sleep with somewhere? This is Live Trail. They have a room, Live Trails. So this fellow, Live Trail, he goes to take my bag out of the back of the car, and he says, what is that? And I said, well, a woman to try, He said, well, gee, I'm a writer, but he was a gardener at Esalen, but he was a writer. And he said, I'd like to take a look at that. So he look, I marked it. Good stories, and that really good stories. Okay, so now I was traveling to a Llama Foundation in New Mexico, and it's a wonderful, wonderful foundation, and it's up in the mountains. And Sufi Sam is buried there, and they've been American Indian vice to this, and when I got up there, Steve, who ran Llama, he was picking my bag out, and he said, "What's that?" And that's Maharaji. and they had, I don't know, 5 or 6 artists staying there. And while we were every supper, we'd read the story, and an artist said, "I'll take that one. I'll take that one. I'll take that one," and that was that's the beginning of it.
So cool.
And who wrote it? You know.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what I think is really important relative to our subject matter, courage, cultivation of, and that is service. And I want you to tell the story of how you thought one day, I've got to do something. I've got to take a little bit of social action, feeding people.
The backpack thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, cool. Well, this is actually happened because of Twitter. Somebody tweeted this link to it was just a couple, sweet couple, and they were saying, here's something you can do if you want to, which is you get a backpack and you go to the grocery store and you put into the backpack the stuff that you would like to have in a backpack if you were homeless. And so you put this stuff into the backpack, toothpaste, whatever you want. It doesn't have to be like, anything noble. You can put a magazine or something, whatever you want, anything you want. Good music if you wanted, something to listen to it with too, hopefully. But you put whatever you want into this backpack. You pick the budget that you want, and you get a bunch of these backpacks and put them in the trunk of your car so that when you're driving around, if you pass somebody who's on the street, you just stop the car and you give them this backpack. And I remember seeing that YouTube video and thinking, wow, that's crazy. That is crazy. What if I actually did that? Like, how weird would that be if I did that? Instead of just watching videos and like, on to the next video of possible good things I could do in the world. Been looking at those videos for years. So I went and I got one of these backpacks. I filled up a backpack with stuff, peanut butter, just various things. And it's really transforms your day or whatever you're doing, because most of the time when I'm driving around, I'm trying to get from point A to point B to serve myself for some reason. I'm going to get a coffee, or I'm going to do some kind of work. I'm going to do something. But if suddenly your whole life you've been going from point A to point B to do something for yourself, and you're going from point A to point B to do something for somebody else, you are in a different universe. That's a different plane altogether. Everything changes immediately in the most drastic way. It was really, this probably just illuminates how selfish I am, because this is like a brand new feeling for me. But, I remember seeing this guy on the street, and he's like obviously homeless. And so I stop my car, I get the backpack, and I'm walking behind a businessman who's got an empty Starbucks cup with just some ice in it. I'm walking behind this businessman, and he walks by this homeless guy and literally shoves an empty Starbucks cup into the guy's hand and just keeps walking. And I'm thinking, I just witnessed Satan. My God, it's actually real. There's evil in the world. Like, people really do that. And so right after this guy shoves this cup into his hand, I get to give him a backpack filled with food, filled with stuff, and because you see the look on his face, this was probably the 7th businessman that'd given him an empty cup that day. You could see how depressing it was. You give him a backpack, and I walked, didn't even know where I was going. I just feel so weird to do this stuff. I walked away, and then as I'm walking back, he's eating and he's feeding peanut butter to his dog, and the dog's tail is wagging, and it's just this beautiful day, and it's like, this is paradise. Like, my universe just turned into heaven in this one flickering moment. And I think that what's really interesting about it, and I guess I hope this is why you're asking me the question, is where I learned to do that is from the internet. That came from the internet. And what's really exciting about what you've done, Ram Dass and Maharaji, and the thing that really blows my mind is that this man in a blanket in the Kanchi Valley, right? Kinchi Valley. Which to me, I don't know where that is, but this man in a blanket comes into contact with you, tells you, keep your mouth shut, don't tell anybody. You come to the United States and tell everybody, and now technology is amplifying what you're doing so that this human has created a ripple that is not just echoing, but is amplifying itself. It's exponentially amplifying itself and instantaneously spreading around the planet, which to me is pretty mind-blowing to think that it all started with an Indian man telling a Jew to keep a secret. That's wild.
That wasn't quite what I had in mind, Duncan. I was thinking about what you started out great on that one.
Sorry.
You stopped being the self-referential stuff kind of stopped in
Sorry.
your, right? That's what I was getting at. I want to read something. I found something from someone very close to Ram Dass and many of us who Ram Dass has done a lot of work with. His name is Stephen Levine. And it's a poetry book that he's done called Breaking the Drought, which is fantastic, by the way. And this one particular poem that really struck me because it seems to be really directly related with Roshi's subject here, Courage to Love. And I'd just like to read it. It's very brief. It's called If Prayer Would Do It. If prayer would do it, I'd pray. If reading esteemed thinkers would do it, I'd be halfway through the patriarchs. If discourse would do it, I'd be sitting with His Holiness every moment he has free. If contemplation would do it, I'd have translated the periodic table to hermit poems, converting matter to spirit. If even fighting would do it, I'd already be a black belt. If anything other than love could do it, I've done it already and left the hardest for last. Isn't that great?
Beautiful.
And really that people, I remember Sharon Salzberg being here once and talking about love, and she said, yeah, people think that's a weak thing, and they have the relationship that many people have to love as something that is lesser than power, for sure, in this culture. So I love this poem.
I got
Yes.
Can I read a poem?
Yes,
I have a love poem I wanted to read to you, Ram Dass.
absolutely.
I have it on my phone here. I didn't write it. My God, that'd be embarrassing if I did. This is a poem. This reminds me of you. It's called The Word. It's by Tony Hoagland. One of my friends is a English professor, so he sent me this. I wish I was someone who had like a reservoir of poetry that I could draw from. Down near the bottom of the crossed out list of things you have to do today, between green thread and broccoli, you find that you have penciled sunlight. Resting on the page, the word is beautiful. It touches you as if you had a friend, and sunlight were a present he had sent from someplace distant as this morning to cheer you up, and to remind you that among your duties, pleasure is a thing that also needs accomplishing. Do you remember that time and light are kinds of love, and love is no less practical than a coffee grinder or a safe spare tire? Tomorrow, you may be utterly without a clue, but today you get a telegram from the heart in exile proclaiming that the kingdom still exists, the king and queen alive, still speaking to their children, to anyone among them who can find the time to sit out in the sun and listen.
Lovely. Yeah.
That's nice. That's nice.
Thanks.
At this point, I'd like to prevail upon you, Ram Dass, to lead us in a meditation on love. So we leave it with you, please.
We are immersed in love. Outside and inside. And you can radiate love from your inside. To all of us, to the planet, to the universe. Every one of us counts in this effort. The love inside is radiated outside. Love yourself. And love the universe. the one inside of all of us is love. We each translate that love according to our lives. No matter how thick is the filter of your karma, you radiate the love of the one. And now let us, a group effort to love our planet. And then now now we are love itself. We are love. We are. We are. Are love. Are love. We are love. We are love. We are love. Be love. Be love. Be love. Namaste.